Hello, wine lovers! I am Yaroslava, sommelier and wine educator, your guide on this journey through a world of wines, spirits, and cocktails. When we choose wine, we want it to be good, a fundamental truth, I would say. Most people also appreciate having a variety of options rather than being stuck with the same dozen familiar labels simply because stepping outside of usual choices feels risky. Budget, of course, also influences on our wine selection. However, good wine is not confined to a particular price range. Time and place matter too. 20-year-old Chardonnay du Pape, for instance, might not be best choice for a picnic or a football party. The best way to avoid blindly navigating the vast world of wine or limiting yourself to a routine selection is to learn how to read wine labels. Labels hold a wealth of useful information, and understanding them can guide you toward wine that fits the qualities you are seeking. While this won't guarantee that every choice will be perfect, it will make your decision more informed and meaningful. To make our life easy and in fairness to protect producers, most wine producing countries have a laws regulation what can go on the label and what standards must to be met for specific names. Europe has the most developed system of wine laws, a logical outcome of producing wine for over 2000 years. In that time, we have crafted an impressive diversity of wines, so winemakers do have a lot to be proud of and to protect. France was the first country to implement wine regulations. In the mid-19th century, a phylloxera epidemic devastated European vineyards, leading to a flood on counterfeit wine. Concerned about quality and reputation, French winemakers began regulating their practices. In 1923, Châteauneuf-du-Pape set rules to control viniculture and winemaking. By 1927, all Appellation d'origine contrôlée AOC system was established across France, setting a model that other European countries soon followed. In 2009, the European Union developed and standardized a system for regional terms and classification are still widely recognized. This video will explore the EU wine laws and labeling standards that are used across the European Union. Let's start with the basic things. Information that must be presented on the label. For example, the labels of Languedoc Pontific and Spanish Cava. I underline the required information with red and the information required upon conditions with blue. Required information. Alcohol content. Languedoc 13%, Cava 11.5%. Country of origin. France and Spain accordingly. The bottler. Languedoc Chains the Bailey Clementine & Co. with addresses. Cava Mdemose with addresses. The importer, if wine is for import. Languedoc Latitude Wines with address. Cava BGI with address. For sparkling wine, residual sugar. Cava is sparkling wine. It is labeled as brut, that means 0.6 to 1.2% of sugar. You can find the terminology of sparkling wine sweetnesses in the third part of video about champagne. Link in the first comment. Information required upon conditions. If vintage is shown, 85% of used grape must come from this vintage. Languedoc 2013. Cava doesn't have a labeled vintage, that means it is a blend of different years, which is common for sparkling wines. If a single grape variety is named, 85% of used grapes must come from this variety. If two or more grape varieties are named, 100% of used grapes must come from these varieties. If more than one is mentioned, all used varieties must be named. The percentage of each variety is optional. Please note that producers are not required to list grape varieties on wine labels, and many choose not to. Variantal listings can be absent on both lower-end and higher-end wines. For instance, basic table wines are often labeled simple as red or white, without any specific grape varieties. No one expects precise consistency in the blend of such wines, so the composition may vary from a bottle to bottle, even from the same producer. On the other hand, famous producers of higher quality wines also often omit grape varieties on their labels. You can expect it to enjoy Chablis, or what is it? Not the fact that it's made from Chardonnay grapes. Likewise, in Medoc, is a named wine, rather than being explained as a blend of Cabernet Sauvignon, Merlot, and Cabernet Franc. For these well-established wines, the composition remains consistent, but producers rely on tradition and reputation rather than listing varieties. A label like Chablis carries much more meanings than Chardonnay. However, if producer does decide to list the grape varieties, it must be done in accordance with regulation. For example, cover labels does not list the grape varieties used. For traditional sparkling wine like champagne, cava, and crema, the variantal composition is standardized for each type, but it's typically not included on the label. In contrast, the Languedoc winemaker specifies each variantal along with a percentage on the label: 45% Grenache, 40% Syrah, and 15% Mourvedre. This combination is a classic Southern Rhone blend, often referred as GSM outside the Rhone region, named after the initials of the grapes. These are the minimum labeling requirements for wines produced in the European Union. Certain categories of wine have strict requirements, but to say the truth cannot be relaxed. Let's move to a more complex concept: wine geographical identification. This is another piece of information that must appear on the label. Broadly, all wines fall in two categories: those with a geographical identification and those without. More specifically, wine can belong to one of three origin-based categories shown on the pyramid diagram. Generally, as you move from the bottom to the top of this pyramid, the quality and average price of wine increase, while production volume tends to decrease. At the base of this hierarchy is the group of wine without geographical identification, mostly simple and inexpensive wines. These wines were previously labeled as table wines, but are now simply called wines. If on the bottle of French wine you see Vin de Table France, Vin de France, or just France on the label without any specific regional names, it is likely a table wine. Requirements for the production of these wines are minimal. It should be a grape wine, not a mix of juice and spirits, but otherwise it faces free regulation. Table wines might only meet the EU basic labeling requirements. This does not mean that each table wine is of poor quality. It can still be a decent wine within its price range. In fact, winemaking is currently booming, so some producers are creating quality table wines with hopes to transition them into higher category. For example, consider this Rapitou Pinot Noir, an interesting case of a table wine. While table wines are often simply labeled as rest or wine, this one specifies the variety, Pinot Noir, which means at least 85% of the grape used must be of this type. However, since it is a table wine, these Pinot Noir grapes can come from anywhere in France. Notably, the alcohol content on the label is shown as a range rather than an exact number, meaning it can vary from bottle to bottle. This is not allowed in wines of higher categories. Let's move to the intermediate category, Protected Geographical Indication, PGI. The table shows translation of PGI as they appear on the labels of various countries, along with traditional terms for PGI that are also used. Geographical indication applies to a border region or area compared to more specific protected designation of origin, PDO. PGI was introduced to encourage table wine producers to improve the quality of their products. It is also provides the option for PDO producers who want to make wines that fall outside of strict PDO regulations. For example, a winemaker in Médoc, a Bordeaux PDO where Malbec is not permitted, could produce real Malbec under the PGI label instead. Wines in this category can still have excellent quality, so PGI wines aren't worth exploring. Here is the example of Italian PGI wine. To qualify as PGI, wines must meet criteria that are less stringent than those for PDO, but stricter than the table wines. At least 85% of the grapes must be grown within the designated region. The wine must be produced within the same region. Only grape species from the Vitis genus and their crosses may be used. The quality and characteristic of wine must meet specific standards set for each PGI. At the top of the pyramid is Protected Designation of Origin, PDO, reserved for wines produced in specific wine regions under precise regulation. This table shows translation of PDOs from various countries as they would appear on the labels, along with the traditional terms for PDO that also can be used. In France, for example, this designation is called Appellation d'origine protégée, adopted in 2009, or the traditional Appellation d'origine contrôlée, AOC. Both terms are valid. The phrase d'origine is replaced by the specific name of a region where the wine is produced. For example, Appellation Bordeaux Contrôlée or Appellation Pauillac Contrôlée. Another way to indicate origin is by listing the specific place name followed by Appellation d'origine contrôlée, such as Macon Village's Appellation d'origine contrôlée. The PDO is a hierarchical structure. One PDO can be subdivided into smaller, more specific groups with stricter requirements and higher wine quality standards. The smaller PDOs can in turn contain even more specific classification, each with increasing stringent standards and correspondingly higher wine quality. We will explore this PDO hierarchy separately, as it can vary from country to country and even within different regions of the same country. Wine labeled as PDO must be produced within the indicated region from the only Vitis vinifera grapes. I will talk about grape species and varieties separately, grown completely in the indicated area. If the label shows Bordeaux Assis, Appellation Bordeaux Contrôlée, all grapes must cast from Bordeaux. Not a single grape can come from Loire Valley or Burgundy. Similarly, if it reads Pauillac Assis, Appellation Pauillac Contrôlée, all grapes must be from Pauillac, a small area within the Medoc region of Bordeaux. The quality and characteristics of a wine must meet the specific PDO regulation. This may include limitation of a territory, sometimes only certain areas within a PDO can be used for grape growing. Permitted grape varieties. For example, Medoc Assis allows only Cabernet Sauvignon, Merlot and Cabernet Franc. That means that winemaker in Medoc could use Malbec, but that wine could not be labeled as Medoc Assis. Grape ripeness, minimum alcohol level, way of growing wines, maximum grape yield, and production methods. Now you know the basics for EU wine laws and terminology, essential for understanding European wine labels. However, each country has unique nuances. First, PDO hierarchies differ between countries and can even vary between regions within the same country. This is especially important when searching for high quality wines. Secondly, many regions have their own specific wine classification, such as Grand Cru, Reserve, Cabernet and others. We will cover these distinctions separately for each country. Today I have all Garnacha wines from Calatayud, Spain. This wine is made from Garnacha grapes grown on vines over 35 years old. Older wines tend to produce fewer berries, but the concentration of flavor compounds in each berry is higher, resulting in a richer, more complex wine. Calatayud is particularly famous for its old wines, some even over 100 years old. Let's break down the information on the label. Country: Spain. Alcohol content: 14.5%. Bottled by Bodega Virgen de la Sierra. Importer: Misa Imports. With few mandatory pieces. Geographical identification: Calatayud Denomination d'Origine (DO). This means that wine has protected designation of origin PDO status and it's made within the DO Calatayud according to its specific standards. If you are familiar with DO Calatayud wine's profile, you can already get an idea of this wine's characteristics, if you have not tasted it. Vintage: 2018. This makes the wine 6-year-old, which can be beneficial for Garnacha from older wines. Additionally, 2018 was excellent year for winemaking in many regions, including Spain, which is another plus for this wine. Grape variety: 100% Garnacha. The producers has also provided some extra details on the label. All grapes come from the old vines grown at altitude of 800 to 1000 meters. High altitude vineyards are often valued for their tough growing condition, which tend to yield more intense concentrated grape juice. The wine is fermented in all cement vats, followed by 6 months in oak barrels. Including these extra details is a voluntary step for producer, and it's rare to see this level information on the label. But it's always a pleasure when I share this insight. Let's try the wine. This one for you, this one for me. Dark deep color. Carnaccio from young wines would be much lighter. Blackberry and cherry. Soft, silky, with soft round tannins. Very good acidity. Notes of black olives, spices and prune. Long stable aftertaste. Stay with me. Subscribe to my channel. Feel free to ask questions and don't hesitate to support me. Salud!